So, well, shucks, guys. Let's go ahead and get started and do this very subtle lesson. It's called the bell hand. Why is it called the bell hand? Because the shape of the hand is like a bell. And it's done lying down. Yay!
Yay.
So go ahead and lay yourselves down comfortably. If you need a blanket because there's not much movement, you might want to cover yourselves up if you're in a chilly environment. And just take a moment to sense yourself contacting the floor, your back contacting the floor. The weight of your hips, the torso, the shoulders, back of the chest, the back of the head. And the width of the shoulders and the length of the arms. And here comes Carol Waters. Good morning, Carol. We just got started. We're on our backs with a minimal lesson. If your legs are long, you can notice how long they feel today, how heavy the right leg is compared to the left, the contact of your heels. And we don't ever really check in with the soles of our feet, but the lesson does involve a bit of foot movement. So sense the soles of your feet. They're kind of naked there without standing on anything, but can you sense the soles of your feet? Could you draw an outline around each foot? You have a little foot shape. And then if your feet are not standing, go ahead and stand them up. And just bring your attention to your right hand and place the palm down on the floor next to you on the floor. And begin to draw the little finger and the thumb along the floor towards each other. And then let that go. And do that a couple of times. Draw the little finger and the thumb in the direction of each other. And notice how the rest of the hand responds. And then draw the thumb and the ring finger towards each other. Just of the right hand. And the next finger, the middle finger, towards the thumb. And the index finger towards the thumb. And then bend your elbow so that the forearm is vertical of your right hand. And just very lightly play a little bit with touching each finger to the thumb, very lightly. Each finger to the thumb, the tip of the little finger, next finger. And humans are the only animal that can do this. Primates cannot touch their thumb to their fourth finger or their little finger, but we can. Very lightly, very delicately. And then each time you touch your finger to your thumb again, could you make a small movement as though you were pulling a thread? You're pulling a thread between the thumb and the finger that's touching the thumb. And notice what you do with your wrist, with your breathing. If you were pulling a thread out of something, what would you do with your hand? So you could allow the wrist to relax forward and the fingers to kind of dangle, and then pull a thread, and then pull another thread. And as you pull the thread, the hand changes its relationship to the floor. And bring your arm down to rest by your side. And imagine you could pull a thread out of the rug, out of your mat, with your little finger and your thumb. And you'd pull it out of the mat and you'd bring your forearm vertical, and the fingers would be pointing, they'd start out pointing in the direction of your right foot, the direction of the feet. And then the hand would float down. The hand would float down to the carpet again, all the way down. And then you'd pull another thread with a different finger. Pull another thread. And so the movement of the hand and the wrist is when you're drawing the forearm away from the floor, the wrist can bend. The wrist can bend forwards, and then as the hand returns to the floor and floats back down, the hand can open, the entire hand can open, and the wrist can go the opposite direction. So the back of the wrist can lead the hand away from the floor, and the front of the wrist can lead the hand back towards the floor. So that it's a very graceful sort of billowing movement, like a silk scarf, like a silk scarf in slow motion. And you just pull one thread and you let it go, and then you float with the hand and the arm down towards the floor. So that the last thing to arrive on the floor is the fingers. The last thing to arrive on the floor is the fingers. The heel of the hand will be what arrives on the floor first. So some of you have cooked spaghetti for fingers on the way back down to the floor. Can you open the hand and spread the fingers and pull them backwards as the hand goes down towards the floor? So backwards means backwards toward, yes, there, right. So it's a very willowy, graceful, sort of balletic movement. That's it, that's it. So it floats up and it floats down. And you're pulling silk threads. You're pulling silk threads very delicately. And then letting them go. And the palm of the hand opens as it returns to the floor. The palm of the hand retracts into itself as it comes away from the floor. And these are the sphincter muscles. There are sphincter muscles in the palms of our hands, in our mouth, in our eyes, in our genitalia. There are ring muscles, and so we are activating, and in the soles of the feet too. So we're activating these ring, they're called ring muscles, by doing this movement with the hand. And when one ring muscle activates, they all activate to a lesser degree. So rest your right hand on the floor and begin to do the same movement with your left hand. So what did we do first? First, we just explored bringing one finger closer to the thumb. So the left hand is palm down. You just bring the finger along the floor towards the thumb towards the finger. Notice how the whole hand responds, or just it's a different intention. And then you could gather an imaginary thread with one of your fingers and thumb and draw it away from the floor and lead with your wrist, a very delicate movement. Pull the fingers towards the palm of the hand and then spread the fingers and open the palm of the hand and let it float back down. Float back down. So we're working with the other hand unless you are working with the right hand. We're working with the left hand. And since it's a simple movement, we use our hands more than anything. Thousands and thousands of patterns are in the hands. Our ability to move the hands in different combinations. You can begin to pay attention to your breath. Pull a thread, let it go, the hand floats down. What happens? What happens in the area of the belly about an inch or two below the navel? When you breathe in and when you breathe out, and when you pluck a thread and let it go and float back down, just pay attention to this area of the lower abdomen, the movement from the breath. It's like music in the background. Good. And then take a rest. Take a little rest. Stand your feet again. And this time use both of your hands simultaneously to draw threads, imaginary threads out of the floor. And so as the little fingers touch the thumb, they come towards, the hands come away, the forearms come vertical, and then they float back down, and you grasp very delicately. We have the finest motor control possible is in the hands and fingers. So very delicately draw a thread and let it go. And again, in the background, this music of the breathing, however you're breathing, can you bring your attention lightly to also to this area below the navel? Where you might feel like there's a small balloon in there that inflates and deflates. And both hands come away from the floor together. They float down to the floor together. And the next time you draw your threads away from the floor, can you breathe in? And can you place the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth? And then as you breathe out, you can let the tongue rest down on the palate. So we're just adding the breath in as you draw the threads, and the tongue lightly touching the top of the roof of the mouth. And then everything comes back down. The tongue comes down, the hands come down, the breath goes out. And let's give that a rest so you can lengthen down your legs, rest your arms, rest your hands. Stand your feet again. Bring your attention again to this place below the navel and observe the breath in and observe the breath out. And can you begin to rock the pelvis towards the belt line the next time you breathe in, and then rock the pelvis in the opposite direction as you breathe out? So that this little balloon gets smaller and comes in as the back of the waist comes closer to the floor, and then expands forward as the lower back comes away. And follow this through all the way to your head, through your spine, into your jaw. And the next time you roll the pelvis under, can you pull the genitalia up? So pull the pelvic floor and the genitalia up, and then release like a flower opening as you release and roll the pelvis the opposite way. So we're adding some pelvic floor to the breath, but not in a forceful, strong way. It's just, these are the ring muscles. These are the ring muscles. We're intentionally activating them so we can observe them. And then could you come back to this movement of the hands, but instead of pulling threads out of the floor, could you simply make your hands shape like a bell as they come away from the floor, and then open as they go back down? And kind of like a jellyfish might be moving itself through the water with the tentacles all dangling behind. There's this beautiful pulsating dome-like movement. And we're doing this with our hands. Like you could propel yourself forwards like a jellyfish. And the pelvic floor pulls up and the belly goes in and the spine goes down towards the floor at the back of the waist, so that the more of your system begins to sync up with this movement of your hands. Breathing in, the little balloon below the navel goes in, the spine goes closer to the floor behind the waist, the pelvic floor is drawn up, and then everything releases, nice and full and soft. Organize it in a way that it's very comfortable and that you could travel for miles through the ocean with your jellyfish hands. And let's take a rest. You can leave your knees up, you can lengthen them down, and just float. As you're resting there with your legs long, bring your attention to the sole of your right foot, the forefoot underneath. And could you begin to pucker the foot and draw the toes towards the bottom of the foot a few times? Just pucker the foot, like you're drawing all the toes towards each other and towards the bottom of the forefoot. Lightly, lightly. Notice what happens with your ankle when you draw the toes. So the next time you draw the toes towards the bottom of the forefoot, allow the front of the ankle to flex, and then spread the toes and open the bottom of the forefoot as you bring the foot back to neutral, so that the foot is mimicking in its own way the movement of the hand. the movement of the hand. So the knee could bend. Knee could bend as you draw the toes towards the sole of the foot. And you could, with your right hand, go along. So now the right side, the whole right side of your body can sync up and become two jellyfish. The knee doesn't have to bend a lot. Just find out what works. But the knee bends as a result of the movement of the foot. If you can find that integration, those relationships. If the knee bends in, then the groin, the hip joint will flex. Becomes a little bit like a swimming movement. And then transfer over to the other side. With the left foot, first explore just lightly puckering the sole of the foot, drawing the toes in towards the center, pulling them under, allowing the front of the ankle to flex, the knee to soften, the hip to soften, like paddling with articulate toes. And then let your left hand do this bell-like jellyfish movement together with the left foot. And the breathing and the tongue on the roof of the mouth. As everything comes up, even the tongue is drawn upwards. Leave it. Float. Pay attention to the breath below the navel. And can you draw your knees, your feet to standing without disturbing the movement, the soft movement that's happening there below the navel, without affecting it at all? You could draw one leg up, one after the other. Notice where the action of that little balloon inside might stop. Do that a couple of times. Bring your legs down and bring them back to standing with a minimal amount of affecting this soft, pulsing balloon without affecting the chest, without stopping the breath, whatever path your legs take, that it can be very quiet, the pelvis up and down, the legs soft, so that a softness starts to spread more and more like jellyfish hormones through your whole system. And the next time that your feet are standing, you can leave them standing and bring your arms down by your sides. And start this movement, this jellyfish movement, this bell hand. Make it softer, more graceful, propelling yourself through the water. Maybe you're one of these jellyfish that changes colors, like a kaleidoscope light show. And your feet could also become little jellyfish. The toes draw under towards the sole of the foot. You rock onto the heels. The soles of the feet open, the toes spread, and everything settles back down. And listen to how the movement of the feet and the rocking of the feet onto the heels can give a little cue to your pelvis, your lower back, maybe even to your breathing. Maybe that little balloon inside you below your navel goes in, down towards the floor. And then as the jellyfish open and expand, where this is the moment they're floating, your little balloon inside expands forward as well, and the pelvis rocks forward. And you can draw this sort of jellyfish energy all the way up your spine to your head. Does your neck know anything about these graceful movements that you're making with your furthest extremities? The feet stay bent, the knees stay bent. It's simply a little movement in the feet. Simply a little movement in the feet, unfurling, furling and unfurling the toes, rocking the pelvis under, pulling the pelvic floor up, the tongue to the top of the roof of the mouth, and the eyes, they could look up so that the back of the neck can come away from the floor as the soles of the feet come away from the floor, as the forefoot, back of the neck comes away from the floor, as the back of the waist goes towards the floor, and you have this lovely flow. The knees stay bent, the feet stay standing. It's just a movement in the ankles and the feet. And the hands and the arms and the breath and the belly. Imagine these soft, boneless jellyfish. The jellyfish had the planet's first nervous system. So our spinal cords have some jellyfish. We have some jellyfish in us. Maybe you can tap into that ancient pattern. It's in there somewhere. You could imagine your cerebral spinal fluid flowing up from the tail through the brain and back down with the movement of the hands and the feet and the breath and the pelvic floor and your insides, and everything syncs up in this direction, north and south, expansion and contraction, the first movement of a cell, expansion, contraction. open and close, opening and closing the ring muscles. And they're all interconnected. You could even play with squinting your eyes shut as you pull, and then opening them, relaxing them as you float back down. You can find the coordination, the timing, all these places. You could imagine that this propels you through some kind of watery environment. Find it softly and gracefully and bonelessly. The jellyfish don't have any muscles. Don't quote me on this, but I believe that the jellyfish are ring, like the ring muscles. Let it flow, let it spread. It's like a feeling of this movement washes through you from the tail to the top of your head. And it's soft. You stay away from the borders, the extreme borders of the movement. You just work in what's soft and easy and comfortable. So that the movement can become a thought. And the thought becomes a movement. It's all one long tube. It starts with a thought, and then the thought is the movement, and the movement is the thought, until you can reach a state where you don't know anymore. Which is it? Is it a movement or a thought? And let your knees go down, and let your arms go down, and float. Observe the movement in the little balloon inside, below the navel. What's the sensations? What are the sensations inside? Let's have one more little go in our jellyfish pod. So without disturbing the breath, the softness, the freedom in your lower abdomen, the breath, can you bring your feet to standing somehow? Somehow bring your feet to standing without disturbing or stopping or affecting the breath or the ribs or the chest or the belly. And then when you're ready, find your own internal pulsing. Find your own internal pulsing. Where you have the thought, you've got all the pieces, the tongue and the breath and the belt line and the soles of the feet and the palms of the hands, the breath, the pelvic floor, got all these pieces. And so now just a thought, and you start traveling the feet. So that the movement becomes a wave that passes through and then recedes back down. Undulation, a wave, a jellyfish. And jellyfish, they can't really direct themselves anywhere. It's odd, they can move themselves, but the ocean carries them in the current. So can you be carried in the current of your own breath, your own sense of aliveness? Trace your way back to these watery beginnings. And you might find that there are moments when you feel like you disappear. Because there's so much harmony with the movement and the thought, and the thought and the movement. So you're just being. What happens when you think, oh, the pelvic floor? I forgot about that. The pelvic floor on the left side or the right side. You can make these little internal adjustments. Okay. Some of you are resting. Some of you may be asleep. Let's bring this journey to a close. Our little underwater adventure. So what is your resting state? Can you still feel, you might still feel the echo of this fluid moving in you.